Hello, everybody. This is Joshua Hatton with One Nation Under Whiskey podcast. I'm joined today and always by my good friend, my business partner, my alter ego.
Oof. I wonder which side I am.
Yeah, are you left shoulder? Are you right shoulder? Mr. Jason Neil Patrick Harris Johnston Yellen in the hizzy.
Woo-hoo.
How you doing, Jason?
Bring it in. Bring it in. Like, my hands are in the air, and I don't care.
All right. Is that how you were waving them? As if you just don't care?
Absolutely. Thoroughly. I'm still thinking about which shoulder I am of yours. To be honest with you, I don't know which is which. When you say right and left, I don't know which one lives on which one.
I've got to believe that everybody assumes the devil's on the left side, right? Because your left hand is the south paw, right?
The devil's hand, as we call it in Scotland.
Oh, there you go. The devil's hand, right? So it's got to be the left side.
You can tell people I'm going to spend some time with the devil's hand. People know exactly what you mean.
Is that like The Stranger? What is that? Is that something?
That's exactly what it's like. People in Scotland right now are like, I have never heard this. This must be an Ayr thing. Like, no, I am just making it up as I'm sitting here. This is not an Ayrshire thing. This is not a Maybole thing. No, I am just making it up. So sorry. Not sorry.
I think it's a High Street on Maybole thing. Everybody on High Street in Maybole know exactly what we're talking about. So listen, Jason, go ahead.
I was gonna confess.
All right.
I have at least one left-handed uncle, and when he was growing up, it was definitely considered the devil's hand, and you're not meant to be writing with your left hand. That part is 100% true.
You couldn't write with your left? Is that true?
You're not allowed. You weren't allowed.
Could you correct with your left?
Oh my God. The listeners cannot see your Cheshire cat grin after you said that, and I just kept plowing on. Nobody could see how pleased you were with yourself. The pride you took in that.
It's only going to get worse, and you'll see, because I have a specific question here for you, Jason.
I know you do. I know you. I'm not gonna lead the host because I know exactly what question you're gonna ask me.
Last episode, you couldn't answer it. Last episode of Extra, I poked at you about this. Here we are, a good 3 to 4 weeks in to the official launch of Indiana Jones 5, The Dial of Destiny.
The Dial of Destiny.
And you have finally seen the movie. Solo or with the family?
It was going to be a date with myself and Tamara, and then Zev at the last second said, my buddy's going to come see it, so is it okay if I'm in the cinema at the same time as you?
Oh.
Knowing that we were on a date. And it was like, of course it's okay that you're in the cinema. And then he showed up with his buddy and his buddy's family. So we ended up being, I think there were 8 of us watching it when Tamara and I had gone out to watch it on a date night.
I think it's...
And it was great. It was fun. I like seeing people. It's perfectly fine.
No, it's good. But, like, does any part of you, like, it's kind of weird that your kid's with another family?
Well, and we all sat together.
Oh, you did?
We were all one back row of people. So
you couldn't do any necking? There was no necking happening.
Well, we did. It was awkward, but yeah, we have some. No, we did not. No, Joshua, we did not. We pulled the ripcord on that option. So, but I tell you this:
go ahead.
As I sat there watching this movie, I'm thinking to myself, what is this joke that Joshua has had in the chamber since he first saw this movie that he has mentioned multiple times? And will he remember said joke when the time comes to tell it?
So
that was in my head when I was watching Indy.
So my question to you is, before I tell this joke, Do you agree? Because we can't give spoilers. I'm certain there's right. It's too early.
You've got to
right?
be real careful here. Yeah, real careful.
Can you confirm that Indiana Jones 5, The Dial of Destiny, is a return to the good? A return to good Indiana Jones filmmaking, film watching, and film enjoyment?
It's interesting to me that you keep calling it Indiana Jones 5, The Dial of Destiny, when it's just Indiana Jones, The Dial of Destiny. They have not put a numerical value on this movie.
Well, it's the 5th movie.
It is the 5th movie. It's just when you keep giving it its Sunday name, it's a bit like my Neil Patrick Harris, which I do love. I absolutely do love. But it is not in my passport. And Indiana Jones 5 is not in his passport. Okay. So, yeah, without spoilers, I would go so far as to say the movie going experience right now, writ large, is wrapped in nostalgia. And Indiana Jones does not shy away from that current trend.
Correct. Oh, okay. So, but did you enjoy it?
Without giving too much away, I have never bought into the lambasting that the 4th movie took.
Oh, interesting.
You know, a number of people said the 4th movie was absolutely ridiculous. Now, I will include spoilers for the 4th movie, but not the 5th. The fact that it involves aliens on Earth and a spaceship.
Yeah.
Because apparently you're not meant to say UFO now. UFO now means something else. Blah, blah, blah. People were outraged. And the thing I said at the time was...
Yeah.
Right? Right? The thing I said at the time was, this is a 1940s style serial, episodic, comic book, Saturday morning show at the theatre kind of enterprise.
Yeah.
To be outraged that it got silly and ridiculous and included aliens, I never got like, or the most famous scene for number 4 when he survives a nuclear blast by jumping inside a refrigerator.
Yeah.
That then gets hurtled miles away, right? Like, it's completely ridiculous.
Yeah.
But for me, part of going to Indiana Jones is it's ridiculous. Embrace how ridiculous it is.
Right, because the argument against aliens and spaceships and against nuclear refrigerators or being protected by a refrigerator with being protected by a nuclear bomb with a refrigerator, that all fits firmly within Indiana Jones. Movie 1, there's a special spirits or angels or God or whatever it is that melts Nazis. Episode 2, this cleric guy rips out a guy's beating heart. The guy stays alive and his chest closes up, and then he gets burned, and then the heart burns. Right? None of this stuff can happen. The 3rd movie, they're saying that the Holy Grail can heal things and make you live hundreds or thousands of years. Movie 4, there's aliens. Movie 5, we're not going to talk about it. But each movie has a spot where it says you're going to experience the fantastical and you need to be okay with it. So the fact that people complained about aliens in the 4th movie as being ridiculous, no. The reason why I didn't like the movie is because I thought Shia LaBeouf's character was not great. They really seemed to lean on in the 4th movie, in the Crystal Skull one, Harrison Ford being elderly. They almost seemed to play up him moving a bit slower, which I think they remedied in the 5th movie. And so those were the things that I disliked about the fourth movie the most.
But just real quickly on that point in number 4, my thought in the cinema was they were preparing to hand the reins of the franchise off
to Shia
LaBeouf.
Yeah.
Right? That's what I felt in watching that. And so, Indy was getting old and Indy was aging out, but here's this young upstart greaser ready to take on the mantle.
Yeah.
And Shia LaBeouf is not particularly good in that movie. But there's still a lot of fun, silly things happening in the fourth movie. So to answer your question, I thought the fifth was more of the same. And I thoroughly enjoyed it. I very nearly went back to see it a second time 2 days later, but it didn't quite fit in. I ended up trying to finish a book on actual Nazis rather than going back to the cinema.
Jason, I keep telling you, stop trying to read Mein Kampf. Like, stop.
I tell you, man.
It's terrible. It's terrible, Jason.
I tell you, man. No, actually, the book, if we're going to recommend a movie, I'm going to recommend the book. The Escape Artist by Jonathan Friedland was magnificent. Tells the story of the first Jew. He was one of two, but the story of the first Jew to escape from Auschwitz.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, and it's a remarkable retelling. It also continues with this story, and you find out that not all heroes are perfect people. And I think that's a lesson that's well worth making, well worth returning to. But an incredible book from Jonathan Friedland. I think it came out in 2021. So
what's it called
I know
again?
there are listeners who take book recommendations. I highly, highly recommend that. And I'm very pleased to say it has absolutely nothing to do with whiskey. And instead has a lot to do with the worst atrocity perhaps humanity has ever put upon itself. And I say perhaps just to be generous to Pol Pot. And I don't know why I'm trying to be generous to Pol Pot.
What was the name of the book again? The title?
The Escape Artist. Okay. And there is, Joshua, an audio version.
Beauty. There you go. I'm 80% of the way done with by the smoke and the smell. So listen, back to Indiana Jones and my joke.
Yes, please. Yes.
So,
oh gosh. Okay, here we go.
in my opinion, I think because people have started ranking their films, like the best indie films, and so in my opinion, this is
I love indie films. It's my favorite genre of cinema.
Ranking their Indiana Jones films. Jesus Christ, Jason. In my personal list, in this order, is 1, 3, 5, 2, and 4.
Oof. Those first three are a slam dunk. There's no doubt about it.
Oh, you're going to put 4 before 2? You hate Temple of Doom that much that you're going to put Crystal Skull.
I really do hate number 2. I really do.
Well, just clean up properly.
I think
it's fine.
But I also think it has aged less well than the fourth. Like the fourth makes a safe return to Russians, right? Right? And it's it's pretty crisp and clear there. I think the questionable racism of the first one is more an out-and-out racism of the second. That in its time, the 80s, it was what you said. It was how you thought about people. It was how you looked at other cultures. And I just don't think it's as easy to sit with in 23.
So if casual racism were still cool today, you'd have a different opinion of the movie.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. Who knew casual racism would have an expiration date?
Who knew? So here's what I have to say, Jason. I think that because the second and fourth movie really were not that great, it only proves that these Indiana Jones movies can't even, which is really odd.
Whoa. Wow, this is like you can't write with your left joke from earlier. My God.
I told you.
All
There's
right.
my joke. That's my joke.
Wow.
This movie series cannot even, which is odd. There you go.
Wow.
I've been sitting on that stupid joke. for
I'm going to sit with
fucking 4
that.
weeks.
When did that hit you? At what moment did you have your personal Cheshire cat grin when you were like, oh, that's good?
I
Oh,
mean,
that's-
the fact of
that's
the matter
good.
is that joke's been going on ever since it became popular for people to say, oh my gosh, I can't even, which is the worst response to anyone's reaction who can't deal with insert whatever it is here. Because I can't even what it's always annoyed me. And so anytime someone said I can't even, I would just say, that's odd. So it's been going on for years, and then when I started running the numbers, which is why I was calling it Indiana Jones 5, The Dial of Destiny, it was all a setup, Jason. It's all playing the long game.
Wow. This suddenly feels like the end of The Usual Suspects. Like, I feel like our, multi-minute conversation is now, like, I'm seeing clearly, oh, that's why he said that. And, oh my gosh, and written on the underside of my cup was Indiana Jones 5. Like, wow, this is just...
That's me. That's Kaiser Sose walking away. I don't limp anymore, Jason.
Wow. Well, I will say this, Joshua, that was definitely worth waiting for. That was...
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Listeners can't even see my face and they know it's dripping with sarcasm.
Yeah, I'm not taking tone right now. I don't see tone, Jason. Anyway, listen, we've talked about Indiana Jones and the Holocaust for a good 17 to 18 minutes. I think that it's important for us, unless you object, for us to turn our sights over to today's guest, which is a conversation with Felipe Schrieberg, who listeners will recognize his name. Hopefully, over the past few years, we've used articles of his to drive episodes of Extra Extra. It's all about whiskey, and we've recently had a chance to talk with him.
Yeah, it was terrific finally be in the same spot as him. It is remarkable. I was thinking this after we concluded the interview, and I was going about my usual family business. We conducted an interview where you're sitting in Connecticut, I'm sitting in Virginia, and he's sitting in Gdansk or in Poland.
Poland, yeah.
Maybe not specifically Gdansk. And just thinking that came together so easily and so quickly, and it was easy to sit and chat with them over Zoom, and it was the first chance we'd had to have any extended conversation with him. And, to be honest, the interview is a hair longer than we would normally go, but we had things to call back from Extra Extra.
Yeah,
we had things to call back from One Nation Under Whiskey. We had a whiskey conversation. There's even a point in this upcoming interview that listeners will hear where we're talking about, bottle that comes with an album that, we'll explain all of this as the interview goes along. But I was asking myself the question, I don't know how to buy any of this. And if I don't know how to buy any of this, none of our listeners will know how to buy any of this. And I said, Felipe, how do we buy any of this? And he said, I'm so terrible at this. Like, no, you're like all of us. You just have a whiskey chat, right? You're not angling for a sale. You're not angling to make people know about, the thing that you want to be selling to them. You're not turning every sentence back into a sales opportunity. We were just chatting whiskey and future of whiskey and the past of whiskey. And it was easy peasy. So yeah, I will also stop talking at this point and let's get over to this slightly longer interview with Felipe Schrieberg.
Felipe Schrieberg, thank you so much for joining me and Jason today. It's interesting. Your name is a name that's popped up over and over and over through through a decent part of this podcast, because for the past 4 years, Jason and I had this sort of secondary podcast that we call Extra Extra. It's all about whiskey. So One Nation Under Whiskey is where we have these sort of long-form conversations, and we just hear about what people are doing, whether they're writers or bottlers or musicians or whatever. But in Extra Extra, we always source a whiskey news story or a whiskey adjacent news story that strikes our fancy, and then we read the story and we riff on it for a few minutes. And your name has come up a number of times because of some of the articles that you've written. So it's nice to actually finally meet you. But what's interesting is today we're not just talking with you about your whiskey journalism, but you're starting a new endeavor. You're starting both an independent bottling company and a record label at the same time called Rhythm and Booze. So I wanted to, if you wouldn't mind, let's kick it off for our listeners who may not be familiar with your name, or maybe they've read your stories a little before. It'd be good to hear your story a little bit, maybe how you came to whiskey through passion, through family. Like, how did all that start? Where was your spark in whiskey?
Yeah, sure. Well, of course, thanks so much for having me on. It's a real pleasure. I know about you guys primarily through your whiskey, because I know a couple of the New York whiskey guys who have gone on and on about Single Cask Nation. We've met, I believe, Joshua, very briefly, and I think it was you at the Matt Lurin's Water of Life Festival in 2015. If I'm not mistaken, I think you were hosting one of the speed dating tables. I'm quite sure that was you. Am I 100%? No, but I think it was, because I do remember trying Single Cask Nation then. And so we were the band playing in the back courtyard to maybe like 2 people.
Oh, wow. Okay. Oh, wow. What was the band's name?
We didn't use the Rhythm and Booze name then, so we would have gone under the Blues Water, the 2 of us.
Okay.
Same kind of deal. And But anyways, so let's answer your question before we venture down a little how I know you rabbit hole. But so I started drinking whiskey because I did my undergrad in Scotland. So I was at the University of St. Andrews, like many Americans, and I never liked beer. And a lot of alcohol just didn't do it for me in general. I still don't like beer. It turns me into a walking violation of the biological convention, by the Geneva Conventions on Biological Weapons. Essentially, I fart a lot, right?
Wow.
And so, we
went into
podcast.
farts this early. This is great.
An indication of where the rest of the evening may lie. But and so I could never find something that really worked for me that I really liked that much. Every once in a while I'd have a whiskey and it's kind of like, I kind of like this, all right. And then my last year of my undergrad, I discovered there was a student whiskey society that's been there under my nose the whole time. You pay £6 and you get to try absurd quantities of world-class whiskey. And this is the Quake Society at St. Andrews, which I believe is still going strong. From that, I fell in love with whiskey. It was me and a good buddy. We would go to these tastings. Then we'd go to the local spirits shop, a phenomenal shop called Luvian's. They'd have these awesome single malts on sales for like 20 quid. So you tenner each. We'd get through a bottle of whiskey in like a week, maybe a week and a half. We'd go on to the next thing that's on sale. And so we really fell in love with it that way. And then from there, I moved to Edinburgh to do my master's. And I worked at a whiskey shop called Robert Graham for about a year during my master's. And from there, I was able to taste a lot more and really start to get a bit more geeky with it, understand what's going on, develop more of a language of taste, shall we say, as well. And things just kind of kept rolling. I ended up then doing my dissertation on sustainable whiskey distillation on Islay. And then I started running tastings. And then I started writing about whiskey. And it somehow then became a career, essentially from there. And I just kind of fell into it. I've kind of kept trundling along ever since. And then on the music side, I've had a blues band and still have a blues band in Edinburgh for a long time. We've gone for over 10 years now. And so that was a band called the Blues Water. Now, our former drummer, now my current drummer with this project, the musicians will get this. For other people, it just gets a bit silly. But So we loved Isla whiskey in particular. So we had the idea, let's do an Isla tour, but we don't want money. We want a bed, we want food, we want whiskey. So off we went, and this was 2012. So I just started my master's back then. And because we didn't have a band name or anything to show for it, we simply stole this other band name, the Blues Water, even though that wasn't the Blues Water at all, to just be able to say, hey, here's a video of us. What do you want us to play? Because we didn't have any recordings of the two of us playing. And off we went to Isla. And it was one of those definitely was a life-changing trip in that definitely set me on the path of starting to think about combining music and whiskey. And while we're out there, we meet all these incredible people. We try all this incredible whiskey, lots of great kind of experiences and stories. We're in one hotel no longer with us called the White Hart Hotel, which was a dodgy.
Stayed there.
Dodgy place.
Real dodgy.
It's gone now. They've renovated into something fancy now. So I think it's called Number 1 Charlotte Street or something. Anyways, so you guys have the knowing nods. You know what that place is like. We're playing a gig there, right? And this very, very merry lady comes up to us and she goes, Boys, you guys are quite good. Yeah. I'm the distillery manager of Lagavulin, and you're going to come into my office tomorrow, and I will crush you. We're like, what? It's like, we're not sure you are what you say, lady. This is a bit ridiculous. She goes, you're coming to my office at noon tomorrow. It's like, all right, well, we love Lagavulin, so in fact, I'm actually, I don't have a Lagavulin t-shirt on me, but so we show up at noon the next day. Georgie Crawford was indeed the distillery manager of Lagavulin. Mm-hmm. She locks her office and starts with 3 fingers of new make, 2 hours, and proceeds to crush us. And over the course of that,
a woman of her word,
completely. And over the course of that drinking session, she goes, "You guys should come and play the Fay Shield." And we're like, "The what? What?" There's this, and we never knew there was a whiskey festival that's over a week long that happens on the island every year. Yeah. And then, so that trip was 2012. So in 2013, we went to play at Lagavulin at the Fèis, and we've been going to the Fèis every single year since.
Did you play there in 2019? Wow.
Yes, we've been there every year. Yes.
So your drum was a Cask.
Yes.
I saw you play. I spoke with you at the Fèis in 2019.
See the plot's
the whole time I'm like, man, his face. And yeah, there we go. Okay.
So that project came about with the whiskey cask drum. We can get into this later. So that was somehow I managed to convince Diageo to let us stretch goat skin over 2 sides of a barrel. That was a fun project. And so that cask drum is still out there, but we can talk about that later. In any case, so from doing the Fèis, we then started thinking about how can we do this the rest of the year, and that's the Rhythm and Booze Project. Now, confuse things. You have the Rhythm and Booze Project and now Rhythm and Booze Records. So maybe faulty branding on my part. But Rhythm and Booze Project, that's a 2-piece band that combines music and whiskey through gigs and videos and theater and events. And then Rhythm and Booze Records is us taking that idea of combining music and whiskey a step further, going outside of live performance. And the idea with this is, as you guys know, the front label is the album cover featuring the band. The back label will have a QR code where you can stream and download the music from that band, but that music is not on any streaming sites. It is exclusive to the bottle. So the music is made to go with the spirit in the bottle, and the spirit is made to go with the music. They are curated and paired together. And so that's what I'm now working on and hoping to very much scale up over the next year. Yeah. For now, we've got our first release out. We literally now officially can now send and sell bottles to the U.S. without resorting to dirty tricks. We got a retailer on board that's able to ship, and they have a warehouse in New York, which I'm very happy about. And so we're using ourselves as guinea pigs. So for the first 2 releases, it's going to be our own music. And then from there, we're going to bring in other bands that we think are a good fit, or there's liquid that might work, or just looking to see what other directions we can go with this little venture.
Yeah, sure.
So that is a slightly longer than intended rambling run through of what I'm currently doing. And as well, I write about whiskey. I've written some books about drinks. I run whiskey tastings. I'll leave it at that, and thank you for your patience.
Go ahead, Jason. This is Jason's sign of I want to talk next.
Because I just want to squeeze in a very quick little follow-up there, where you just said a moment ago, I've got a lot of other questions sparked by what you said there, but one in particular, there's music paired with whiskey, whiskey paired with music. Which comes first? How have you found that part of the process?
That will change with every single release we do, I think. In the two particular cases we have now, it was that we had recordings that we'd done and that we'd wanted to do, and then it was a matter of finding liquid that we thought would fit. And so for both of them, so for this one's a whiskey, single sherry cask, blended malt. We think, we're not actually 100% sure, it's Edrington malts put into, blended together, so it's like a naked grouse on steroids, essentially.
Yeah.
But there's a little bit of smoke in there that's quite nice. And so that, when we tried a few different samples, we were sent this and we were like, that's the one. That's what works.
Yeah.
That rich profile with the slight smoke, that goes well with kind of two-piece, raucous blues music kind of thing. Then the thing we're going to come out, we have a rum coming out. We're hoping October. We believe we're going to get it ready by October, especially the lessons we've learned from doing this whiskey. That's a Latin pop quartet where I sing original songs in Spanish, and so we got a rum, and so we wanted something that was quite tropical to go with it, and it ended up working quite nicely because we tried a few different samples. Then we got a bunch of grain whiskey in because we thought a grain whiskey, nice and tropical aromas, lots of cream and vanilla, that would go well. Nothing fit. We got a few amazing grain whiskey, some really old stock as well. No. And then this 4-year-old rum came in, and boom, that's it.
Wow.
That's the magic. I dream, I don't know when we'll be able to pull this off, once I do dream of blending to the music eventually, where we're able to do a larger release and you can buy, because you're blending many casks together to go with the music that you're using as inspiration. But we're not there yet. For now, we're curating casks to go with music. I do like the idea of maybe in the future, if we have a cask that we know is good, can we work with somebody who really knows us, who gets what we want to do, who could maybe do music based on flavor or something like that? Is there scope for that? I hope we can reach there. For now, we're keeping it simple, and then we can get tricky once we feel good about what we do.
Wow.
Yeah. Checks out. Good job.
Yeah. So you've got the QR code tied to a single bottling that goes to specific music along with that single cask release or that release. How many songs are we looking at, and do you refill it? Do you ever add to that as sort of a, return to the bottle, and maybe 6 months later there's another song that greets them? Like how are you looking at that?
Joshua, I honestly had never thought of that until you mentioned it. It's a great idea. I never even thought about doing that. When the moment you mentioned it, it's like, that's actually pretty good. Maybe we should do that. Honestly, hadn't had that thought at all. The idea is it's 7 songs on both this one and the upcoming one, kind of like somewhere between an EP and an LP or whatever. So the idea is that the length of it is the amount of time it takes you to go through a somewhat healthy sized dram bottle. Somewhat slowly.
Fill bottle.
Yeah. Both are about between 20 and 25 minutes in length. 7 songs on both of those. Not married to whatever the content is, but they're until you opened your mouth there. That's just what it is. That's the package. That's what's in the bottle. That's what's on the link when you scan it. And every time you scan it, that'll take you to that exact private link where you can find those songs. Is how we have it set up at the moment. But now you've blown that apart, maybe. So.
Wow. Yeah, it's a really interesting concept. Well, let me ask you this then. what connects you to music, right? Like from what you explained, connecting your songs where you're singing in Spanish to a rum, just on the surface, I see a connection because there's a lot of Spanish-speaking countries that produce a rum, and to me, from like that simply makes sense from that perspective. But from like, if you taste something that's sherry cask, are you gonna like, is that heavy blues? Like, if it's lighter flavors, is it light and acoustic? Like, how do you envision the music when you're tasting the liquid?
It's a mix of things. So it's kind of based off just experiences we've had ourselves when we've done our music and whiskey events. We see how people are responding to different sounds, or we see how people are responding to different songs. We've done a lot of tricks, especially using peated whiskey as well, with really, really punchy stuff, and that's worked. So we just kind of knew, based on what we were about, what kind of profile we would want to our music. So we're applying our own subjective desires, or projecting our own subjective desires of what we would want to drink to our music.
Yeah.
We're not even, if you go thinking about what the audience might think, then I think you're going to drive yourself into a hopeless place.
Yep.
And the same was with the rum. And this rum isn't even from a Spanish-speaking country. It's from, I don't even know where, it's just Trinidad. That's all I got.
Oh, okay.
So it really is just, what am I looking for in the profile? Is that there? Does it check off what I envisioned, given what we do? In my own loose mental associations between sound, smell, and taste. If the answer is yes, bottle that thing, right? We've not I do hope as we go, we can explore things in a bit more depth beyond just gut feeling. Just because we're still figuring it all out and doing it cask by cask, and kind of really, and it was just more that, do we have music that works? Yes. Do we have liquid that works, that really does suit what we want? Yes. Is there a lot of scope to dig in the future in a way that could be really cool? Certainly. I really do think, and I do proselytize about this, we are at the tip of the iceberg. I think I even said this, and I think I even used the iceberg metaphor in the presser for this, that we are at the tip of the iceberg in terms of where you could take music and whiskey and how you combine it. There is so much more that can be done. This is our way of just trying to take that further based on our own experiences. But we're at the very beginning. And only now certain musicians are beginning to twig on to what you can do. And even then, we're not even close to what kind of cool... the kind of things that you can do in such a way that you're combining multisensory experiences in a really interesting way. We're not even close to there yet. The fact that I'm using the term multisensory experiences does make me want to throw up in my own mouth, but I do have to use it. I do have to use it. And then as well, though, with that, and I'm sure you guys know what's out there as well, there's also lots of gimmicks that don't really add anything in that sense.
Yep.
But there are more and more interesting things that are happening that I think have a lot of value in terms of creating a special context through which you both experience music and taste quality spirits.
Go ahead.
I'm going to put a pin in the music chat because I'm sure Joshua's got more musical follow-ups here. But if he's inevitably going to take it down a musical path, I'm inevitably going to take it down an academic path. So when you tease that you wrote your dissertation on sustainable distillery practices on Islay, we need to circle back to that topic and we need a lot more information on that. So I'm going to be responsible for taking us back to the academic. I also, just because I've been sitting here thinking it since you mentioned it, did part of your dissertation then get turned into an article for Whiskey Magazine on sustainability and distillation on Islay?
No.
Okay.
No. it wouldn't have done.
Because we were using a Schrieberg piece from there about peat, especially last year when it was all the talk of the town, and there was no date attached to that article. It seemed like an evergreen, and so it was kind of an interesting. Josh and I were trying to place when it might have been written, if it was maybe regularly updated. Wasn't too sure, but please. Talk about your dissertation.
I'll quickly say that Whiskey magazine piece, which was loads of fun to write, that I think is 2000. I want to say it's 2020, 2021.
Which is kind of where we pegged it, given there was something you'd made reference to happening the year before, and we kind of narrowed down some dates based on that.
Yeah, it would have been. It must have been 2021 because I still had hope that the SWA was going to release a peat guideline thing as they had promised, and at the time I wrote it, it was still within it was still within a reasonable timeline, and then that never got released. Anyways, my dissertation was thinking about distillation on Islay by applying a very specific sustainability. I'll call it a sustainability framework called the circular economy. And that was 2014, and it was nice because I went out there to the Fèis. We played the Fèis for the whole week, and I got the university to pay for me to go because then I stuck around for 3 days after and did all my
Smart
field interviews with all the distillery managers after that. Yeah, and so that was looking very specifically. So the circular economy, the Scottish government subscribes to it in a very strong way, and nowadays it's all kind of falling apart, but we can leave that aside because there's a lot there. But the idea behind the circular economy as a framework is, if we look at generally how our economy works, is you take resources, you create product, you use product, you dispose product, and by doing it in this way, you're screwing everything up, which we are. So circular economy is, why not apply a systematic way of thinking where whatever you do, you frame it in terms of resources that can be circulated over and over and over and over again. And in doing so, you actually make money because you are actually reusing the same resources rather than having to spend to re-extract them or deal with the waste of them or process them or something. And so that, and I say this in a very bland way because the idea is meant to be applied across all areas of industrial activity. So I was looking at what can that mean for whiskey, and it was fun, essentially. There's back then there's things that you could. It was a little bit idealistic in that things that I put in there or case studies that I looked at. They're probably much harder to apply on Islay, just because of the nature of it being an island. So that's what that work was about. Actually, if we're on the topic of sustainability, I literally came back today from England, where we had just done a series of gigs with the Oxford Artisan Distillery. So I'm moving from Islay to England now just because we're staying on the sustainability subject. And what they're doing with grain right now is probably one of the most, if not the most fascinating grain feedstock experiments in the entire whiskey world, and how they grow their grains. I checked them out if you've not heard of them. So, because they're led by a crazy Canadian paleobotanist called John Letts, and what he's done is the fields that they use, they grow. They don't care at all about monoculture. They grow everything on one field: barley, rye, wheat, and they bed it. And they use heritage varietals that have longer stalks and longer root systems, so they don't need as much nitrogen. And they also have a whole system where the fields they grow on is also embedded with clover, which is a nitrogen-fixing plant. So it's these self-sustaining fields that don't have to go through fallow periods. Now we're going deep into the agronomy here.
Keep going. Keep going.
So you can keep...
Don't stop now.
You can keep using the same field over and over and over again. You don't need any fallow years, anything like that. No inputs into the ground. You avoid all the issues that you get around organic barley farming, which is a different kind of monoculture and more inefficient, slightly healthier for the soil, but certainly and probably not the answer in terms of being able to scale. So this is a really interesting experiment in being able to get reasonable yields and scale. in a really interesting way. And they just got a lot of funding from Distill Ventures or from Diageo, if you want to
nice.
get it that way as well. So Diageo thinks there's something to this as well. And it also helps that the whiskey they make is absolutely fabulous. So that's an interesting case study today. So I'll leave it at that. On the academic side of things, I guess, with the whiskey, and then Pete's another one. Pete's another fascinating world. Though, let me know how deep you want to go with it, and we can go. But yeah, so there's a lot of interesting things. It's really interesting because there's a lot of really encouraging things happening within the industry. It's an industry that knows that it needs to think 20 years in advance, where so many industries don't know that.
Yep.
Because whiskey naturally thinks this way. It means that even the corporations are ready to get on board with lots of stuff and doing lots of interesting things. And at the same time, there's loads of room for improvement across so many elements of procurement or production or what else you want to look at. So, yeah.
I would like to ask you the one follow-up on Pete. In terms of, we had this use until last year that included garden centres, and the whiskey industry was able to say, look, we're only 4%, we're only 1%. Really, we're a small corner of this. Now that garden centres have been removed from that equation entirely, and the whiskey industry is 99%, 99.9% of this use, what do you think that means going forward? Is the whiskey industry the next in the crosshairs for a full ban? Are there alternatives? What are you hearing on the ground in your conversations?
Oh, honestly, I'm a little bit out of the loop, I would say, partly because I've had a baby, frankly, and also
muzzle.
Now she's a 2-year-old toddler. It's been a while, but
still,
and also just focusing on my own projects. So I've kept slightly less up to date than before, as far as I'm aware, because I am. Whenever I hear anything, I do try to follow it down. I don't think there's been much happening since I last looked at it in depth. I've not seen anything from the SWA. I don't think they ever launched. Maybe they did, and I just didn't catch it. That's possible. I don't think they ever released that Pete strategy that they said they were going to, where apparently the entire industry was in agreement of what's going to happen. So I think it's still just kind of every company does its own thing to account for Pete. And I think that's just where it's at. I think because there's been slightly more attention paid to it, more companies are thinking about, how do we do offsetting or responsible extraction. But beyond that, I'm not aware of anything significant. I'm not aware of any industry-wide things that have happened since I actually last covered it.
Sure. Well, it strikes me the extraction would be the natural next step, where instead of drying out an entire ditch and kind of clearing out all the microbial action occurring therein, it seems like this wet digging might be a way forward. And in our last conversation with Matt Hoffman at Westland, they talked about kind of wet extraction of peat, where you get something that just looks like a pile of manure pulled out of a much larger ecosystem. At that point, you're still disrupting an ecosystem in some way, is that appropriate? So I think, to my mind, that might be the way forward on those conversations. But in terms of industry-wide, we haven't seen anything come down and haven't heard anybody talk about it. But I've got a feeling it's inevitable at some point in the next 5 years, 8 years.
I think some of the things you see is first, in terms of where you're going to dig your peat up from, you've got two different ecosystems you're disrupting. And you've got the kind of I'll call it your standard bogs. And then you've got a very small proportion of peatland, but that still gets dug into, is extremely rare. And that gets dug into, and that's a big issue because you have a lot of endemic species in those parcels there. So that's something that may come up. Because in terms of like the lowland peat bog, which I think is a kind of your standard peat bog for digging up, there's supply for that out there already.
Sure.
But then, there's scope for things. So, for example, you could look at offsetting. So, as in you're doing your extraction, you're trying to you can optimize how you do extraction. But then you could also, fund fund re-wetting activities and peat conservation in general, and do more around that. And some companies do. Then I was talking to a guy who runs, or he's part of an NGO that helps, and that was collaborating with the SWA on their peat strategy. And he was saying, when you have construction, you do get, especially up in the Highlands, a lot of peat gets dug up and thrown away, just gets tossed. Is there scope for using that? Because then you're being a lot more efficient with that bit that's getting dug up for whatever development you need to do. So that's interesting. I've never heard of that happening within the whiskey industry. So that could be an interesting direction. But then a challenge to that, and he did mention it, is one of the things we're getting around peat, and I love peated whiskey, so let's be clear. But one of the things that's come with peat is also a lot of brands are tying the brand of their flavor to where they're digging their peat up.
Yes, that is
so
true.
If you're all of a sudden sourcing your peat from somewhere else that doesn't tie into what you're talking about, you're undermining your brand. So that could cause certain problems there, because you've got to show that you're digging it up from, so let's say you're Highland Park. It's got to come from Highland Park.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden, but Highland Park, the Orkneys, they're delicate. It's a delicate thing. So they are working with the RSPB around bird preservation, but it's got to come from Highland Park. So you can't ship from somewhere else. You can't ship from them or whatever. Or if you're talking about Isla peat, in some brands I believe have shipped mainland peat over to Isla for things here, but there's some things that emerge that could become potential challenges to developing a greener way forward. That's another point that definitely I know for a fact was a sticking point in some of the negotiations that the SWA were having around moving forward on a strategy that the entire industry could agree on. So that's another little fun little policy geekery, peat policy geekery fact there.
Well, yeah, it makes sense. There's this ongoing conversation of terroir and whiskey, and I typically don't believe it for the most part, or at least it having an extreme effect on the flavor of your whiskey. However, peat is exactly terroir. It is the earth, and Isla peat is different from Orkney peat, is different from Highland peat, is different from lowland peat, is different from peat in Washington State, and so on. And so it makes sense that for whiskey, your flavor profile is your brand, right? I mean, that's the way independent bottlers have worked for so long. We get the Lagavulin, not Lagavulin, we get the Laphroaig that doesn't fit the Laphroaig profile, right? It makes sense. They don't want to use it. So would they want to use another source of peat that completely changes their flavor profile? No, that's a problem. Wow.
It's real interesting stuff. But you could go deeper into it, right? Because then it's about, then you got to do, how deep you guys want to go, just let me know. But
Keep going.
You can do a molecular analysis of the peat, and it has been done. So there's the Scotch Whisky Research, SWRI. The SWRI, I think they are, the Scotch Whisky Research Institute. I think I named them correctly. So they're the ones leading the way on the science of Scotch whiskey, shall we say. And they did a lot on peat, and they did a lot of experiments around what exactly gets extracted when you extract the peat, and what comes from that. And actually, of the 150-something compounds in your peat, you're actually only going to be able to taste a small proportion of them, like a third of them. And not all of them are actually phenols. We always talk about phenols in peat, phenolic compounds, blah, blah, blah. But it's not just phenols you get in peat. You get other stuff too. The makeup also, in addition to what's actually in the peat, the nature of the plant matter that's kind of in that peat, that changes not just with location, it changes with depth. It changes radically with depth.
Yeah. Yep.
Nobody talks about what happens when you've got peat dug at a certain depth or a medium depth or a shallower depth and what that means for flavor. Nobody's talked about it. But what you're going to get from that will probably be quite different as well. There's probably a brand that can maybe find a niche there, being like, we use nothing but the finest medium layer peat because that's going to have that. So there's also that comes into play in a really interesting way. So really it's almost about being able to identify, and even the scientists don't quite know where the line ends and where the line begins about which compounds provide flavors and aromas that actually translate to flavors and aromas. They know about some of them. So if you get your actual, you got your phenols, and then you have the actual compound phenols. So you have your M phenols and your C phenols, I want to say. Oh, I should really know that. It's M phenols and another one. There's two different kinds of phenols that provide some of the phenolic compounds that provide really intense phenolic flavors. I hope some chemists out there can nail it down. I used to know.
At our radios right now.
I hope, please shout. I really should have known this. I wrote about it and I forgot what. One is M-phenols, one is letter and phenol.
Yeah.
And those are actual compounds under the actual banner of phenols themselves. And we don't. And if you look at all those different phenolic compounds, we don't know where the line begins and ends. There's no hard boundary on what compounds are providing exactly what flavors to the whiskey from the peat. Some of them, yes, they know, but some they don't, whether phenolic or certain non-phenolic ones as well. So there's something also to be said for the non-phenolic compound peat. But then also there's the fact, and this is something I found out, she just casually, Dr. Rachel Berry, casually tossed this out on a chat I had with her. And maybe some people already knew and that this was obvious, but it wasn't obvious to me, so maybe I'm just a noob, despite the fact that I've been in the industry for a while, that when you're when you're toasting and charring the casks, those release phenols that get into the spirit as well. You can get some kind of phenolic content on a molecular level, whether you perceive it or not.
Yep.
You can actually get some kind of phenolic content into whiskey without actually having it be peated because of how you treat the casks. That was just one sentence, but it was loud and clear.
Sure.
from Dr. Rachel Berry. So that also can play a role. Yes. So it's fun.
Wow.
Peat is fun.
But here's what I like. Aside from one little aside you made there about kind of we only cut the medium peat here for our flavor profile, one of the things Josh and I have been careful of in this season of One Nation Under Whiskey is to discuss sustainability in a meaningful way that moves beyond greenwashing, that moves beyond simple branding. And in everything you talked about there, even when you talk about different distilleries and different conglomerates, talking with the Royal Society for the Protection of Birds, right? Or hiking groups or land use groups or what have you. Like, I do feel like there are real conversations happening here about Scottish land use, Scottish ways of being. You talk about the Scottish government trying to be cyclical and getting themselves into a little bit of trouble. I'm assuming you're talking about the recycling glass program that we've been covering earlier this year as well, that has gone away for the moment but will return. And so I like the fact that the three of us can sit here and talk about meaningful ways to use land, meaningful ways to incorporate peat going forward, greater ways to learn about peat and phenols and break down what it is we love. One of the things that we're so aware of is knee-jerk reactions to you'll never take my phenols from my whiskey, right? It's like, well, maybe we could do it in a different way. Maybe we could get creative. Maybe we could use science. Maybe we could extract better. Like, there are very real conversations to be had here beyond either we're a brand who doesn't use peat or we're a brand who pulls from the middle. Like, I really want us to be having those very real conversations as we move this industry through the rest of this decade and into future decades.
What's encouraging, I think, is that you have both new, small, innovative businesses doing really interesting things, and you also have the big players doing very interesting things.
Yep.
So that kind of means that, sure, there might be disagreement on how it all moves forward or whatever, because, as you guys will know, and I lived for 11 years in Scotland, trying to get a bunch of Scotsmen to do something together is tricky. Everybody's definitely moving forward in a very specific direction. Part of it we'll see how much consumers respond to it as well. That plays into it. How much do actual whiskey consumers want to be seeing this happen? How much do they want to see happen? Signs show that there's encouraging signs that there's that too. So, Nicknean is interesting up in the Western Highlands. So small operation, very remote, very cool operation. They source exclusively from organic certified fields, and they trumpet that. What they've also done really, really good is really encouraging. They've been very thorough in all their carbon footprint accounting, in a way that distilleries might be doing some interesting things. But I believe the actual record on carbon footprinting is, for the Scotch whiskey industry, not amazing as far as I'm aware. So Annabelle Thomas, who's the founder, she's been pushing just simply get your data, do this. It's not impossible. Do it, because then from there you can figure out how to move forward in a more harmonized way. So that's really cool. And then you've got Diageo with these insane green paradise facilities that are able to reuse enormous quantities of energy or water. And then you've got, there's an interesting, Glenmorangie had the whole campaign around sort of restoring oyster bays around where they are as well. Lots of cool things like this. Or then also there's more around, and then also just in terms of even the tourism of it, I think there's more places that are creating natural ponds out of their cooling systems. So that's something that's more visual than actually meaningful on an industrial scale. But it just shows, distilleries are thinking about it. They're thinking about it, and they want to find a way to move forward. And then, then you run into, at one point, is it just symbolic and greenwashing? And at one point, is it significant? But I don't know, overall, compared to what other industries are doing, it's not. It's cool. It's cool to keep track of.
But when you spend as much time talking about whiskey as an agricultural product, as we talk about casks coming from forests, when we talk about water coming from key locations, we talk about peat and peat bogs, living somewhere. Like, we really do talk about the land continually when we're in our industry. And so it makes sense that we're hopefully trying to be better stewards of that land. And if we can see the writing that was on the wall for the garden centres, it probably behooves us as an industry to be ahead of that. So we can point and say, look, we're not just extracting blindly, we are building towards a future. Could you give us a runway? That's a very different question than please don't take it away from us entirely.
Absolutely. Well, it's about looking at changing ways of doing business. Again, I think Oxford, just because I just came back from there, I think Oxford are a really interesting example of reinventing the wheel, because if you look at how they do it, to just stay on them, because their crop, because it's mixed grains on their fields, they have a kind of a distillery character, but they have no consistency. They know it. The Chico Rose is their head distiller and the main blender for them as well. He knows it. He just wants to make tasty whiskey with what he's got, and he knows kind of what his mash bill is with all these crazy fields coming through. And so they know what they're kind of going to get, but they don't have there's no official distillery character, house style, because of the way that the fields are constantly changing. So they're releasing their whiskeys as under years. So it's the 2017 bottling, that was what they did, 2018. And all of a sudden, where in the past where you had brands or distilleries release things in years, but really it was just a gimmick to make them look fancy like wine, but really they were making it the same way then as they make it the same way now. This is actually interesting because you are looking at a completely different
harvest. It's harvest to harvest.
Different style of using the land for whiskey production. Different style of using the land for whiskey production. But then and then also that ties in, I guess, moving a little bit away from sustainability, with something like Glenturret, where they also kind of openly acknowledge we're just gonna kind of change the cask makeup as we go to make it tasty. Here's the 2020 edition of the 12-year-old, and here's a 2021 edition of the 12-year-old. It's a little bit different, still kind of similar, but a little bit different. And so all of a sudden, you're by changing how you approach what you want from whiskey, you change whiskey itself, or at least you change how people think about it. And so consistency, which used to be and still kind of is the North Star of industrial Scotch production, we're starting to see that being played with in a really interesting way, from both a sustainable angle and other ways as well. So that's another cool thing that's interesting. I love Oxford.
Well said.
I love that distillery too. So so I've been, just because I just came back from there, I keep using them as an example, but they are fascinating.
Cheers. Thank you for indulging my deep dive there. I will return the floor to Joshua.
Yeah, no, that was great. A question has been floating around my head, and it doesn't have anything to do with music, Jason. I do apologize. Oof. I forgot to put my basses.
We're back to farts, aren't we?
Some of my bass guitars back here for the conversation, but I failed us this day. I had a conversation with a friend, Kurt Maitland. You probably know that name.
I know Kurt very well. Yes.
Yeah. So he had me on this class talking about independent bottling, and the date of that class perfectly lined up with Gordon MacPhail's announcement that they were looking to move away from independent bottling, right? Which definitely shaped the way this conversation was going. But the question was thrown at me. Given what Gordon MacPhail's announcement, which is it's a pretty large announcement, at the same time, not a very large announcement. Yes, they're moving away from it, but they're going to be at it for the next 100 years. So, it depends on which way you look at it. But the question finally came to, given all the things that are going on within the industry, right, Scottish producers right now are really hoping that tariffs drop in India opens up, parts of China opens up, right? So they're holding back stock, which is increasing the costs of casks on the secondary market through the brokers. And then you add on top of that this reemergence of cask investment schemes. The one that ruined so many families in the 80s is back again to ruin yet another series of families. It's made it really difficult for a small independent bottler like us, who've been at it for 12 years now. And the question that finally came to me was, given all that's going on right now, would you start an independent bottling company today? And my answer was, I didn't even have to think. I said, no. I said, we wouldn't do it. The barrier to entry is just too darn high to do it. And so I pose a different question to you. Given all that's been going on, how do you find the courage to start an independent bottling company right now in what's really a difficult time to do such a thing?
That's a very important question. You're absolutely right. And you've kind of covered everything the things that I've very much been thinking about in terms of what's happening within the industry. I'll give, just because you mentioned him, I will give a quick shout out to Kurt Maitland, because he was responsible for me getting a book deal, my first book deal.
Oh, wow.
Whoa. So I wrote a book about, so this plugging myself some more. I'm using Kurt to plug myself almost right now, but
hashtag humble brag.
That's precisely what I'm doing now. Forgive my arrogance. But Kurt very kindly out of nowhere recommended me to a publisher that he works with. And so I got my first book deal out of them. So I very much owe Kurt pretty much a lifetime of drams. But anyways.
Awesome.
So we went into it. The reason why we went into it is just simply we wanted to take this idea forwards. And we are hoping that because the idea is interesting and we think different, that'll keep it going. You're absolutely right. It's not easy. Prices are just hard, and not only is it that prices are a bit crazy now. It's that it's simply that there's just no stock.
Yeah.
So it's that combination of everything. One of the things I am hoping on, and I've had some encouraging conversations, because right now what we've gotten through middlemen we trust, but they tell us, here's our price. Yes, we know. You let us know if you want to pull the trigger. It's like, yep, I get it.
Yeah.
But we're hoping that we can work directly with distilleries who get it and are willing to be like, okay, yeah, you guys are all right. You don't need much. Here you go.
Yep.
I hope we can do this, because that will be very helpful. One of the problems we just ran into was, so this whiskey, we're able to retail it at 65 pounds a bottle for 13-year-old blended malt, single sherry cask, but 50 cl bottle. So it's not. So the price. So we think that's a fair price.
Yeah.
It's a price that reflects the quality of the liquid, and we do think it's quality liquid, combined with the fact that you're getting this music thing out of it in this really holistic package.
Sure.
I recognize it's not the cheapest thing out there. We think it's worth it. Otherwise, we wouldn't be doing this.
Yep.
So you get it, right? The moment I say 50 CL, you go, oh, wait a second. Yeah, okay. So we had a situation, for example, and we think it'll be worth it. And also just the fact, because we run events regularly, we're about to do a run at the Edinburgh Fringe, doing like a theatrical blues whiskey tasting. We're going to include our whiskey in that lineup. So we're able to get a lot of people to try it. And if they feel good about it, then they'll buy a bottle. And hopefully that's how we'll be able to make it work in a tricky climate.
Yep.
But then I was in a situation where I was talking to a very lovely European importer. And he loved the idea, loved all. We were talking about how to make the numbers work. And he said, well, let me go talk to some shops out here in Germany, see what they think. And the shops kind of said, cool story, bro, but not at this price. And the reason why the Germans are saying this is because the Germans are 10, 15 years behind, where the German bottlers got a bunch of casks when they were still cheap from really cool distilleries, and they bottle them now.
Yep.
And they're able to you can still get, so if you go out to Germany actually and go to like and there's lots of amazing whiskey shops out in Germany, for example. You go out to Germany and other European countries too. You go out there, you get all these insane indie bottlings for like 60 euros.
Yeah. Yeah.
You don't get that in the UK anymore. I don't know and I'd be curious to know what it's, and I guess your listeners already know, but I'm curious to know what's it like to be an indie bottler working with Scotch in the U.S. because I'm curious about that. The UK is what I know, despite my American accent. So that's an interesting thing. So it makes the European side of things tricky for us outside of just shipping to fans that are out in Europe. So we're essentially, so the short answer to your very important question is, yeah, it's hard. We hope we can make it work because we're special.
Well, I've never felt more like a bank manager in charge of somebody's business loan than that last statement. Like, whoa, okay, I believe in you. I believe in you.
It's essentially
on the dotted line.
I think it's because we're going out there ourselves with our events. That's how this is going to work. If we were just trying to market it in kind of your typical ways, probably we'd be in trouble. Is what I think. I don't know. So how about you guys? And how has that changed how you're doing your bottlings? And how has that changed how you guys do business?
Yeah, it's
you can put the reporter on a musical band, but you can't take the reporting chops out of him. Like, look at the way he's just turned this interview back around. You know, like he's writing an article on Single Cask Nation in America.
Yeah, I'll answer this through another Kurt Maitland story. So I did a tasting with his group a week prior to the conversation that I had with him about independent bottling. And it was highlighting 3 bottlings from Single Cask Nation and 3 bottlings from the Impex collection. Impex is the importer that I work with. And it was from the Impex collection. There was a rum, there was a Penderyn, and then there was an M&H. And then from the SCN side of things, there was a rum, there was a Macmira, and then there was another whiskey. I forget what it was, but it wasn't Scotch. And the point that I was trying to make was American consumers better get used to more independent bottlers releasing things other than Scotch whiskey, because the prices become such that if you didn't buy even 3 years ago, the prices that we're seeing now makes it cost prohibitive to bring the stock in, unless you have direct relationships with distilleries, which we do, and we continue to have that, and we'll continue to release whiskeys through those relationships. But because of the U.S. 3-tiered system, everything we do is already 30% higher than everywhere else. So we always, buying at bottom dollar or bottom pound, I guess, really isn't a thing at the moment unless you're distillery direct. So as a bottler, we're shifting a bit of focus. Hopefully I'm not talking too much out of school. It's right now in the U.S. there's a boom with American single malt whiskey, and that's really special to us, and it's a movement that we're really getting behind, because there's some special shit happening, and we want to highlight it. And when we got into this in the first place, we were bloggers. We were bloggers who cared about Imperial or Lechig or whatever, and we were proselytizing these distilleries, these brands, and that part of us never went away. That part of us stays true as independent bottlers. So until things start to change in Scotch whiskey, we're going to start shifting our focus. Maybe we add in some more rum. Maybe we add in some more single grain, right? There's still some deals to be had. And at the end of the day, for us as independent bottlers, our job is to provide new flavors to our consumers. And you can continue to do that through Scotch whiskey, but you can do that through many other styles of whiskey and other styles of spirit as well. And so, so hopefully that answers your question. Maybe bigger picture than just to what's going on with us.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I wanted to spin that one around as well, Felipe, to ask you, the way you're describing the label, the bottle, the brand, the whiskey, the experience, the music, it almost sounds like direct consumer would be your particular friend. Has Brexit kind of put the kibosh on you being able to bottle this in the UK, store it in the UK, and then ship it direct to consumers around Europe and the US, as you mentioned earlier?
We're too stupid to know better, honestly, is the answer. It's that we have the people who bottle it, and then we've got the partners who are able to then just ship it out wherever it needs to get shipped out. That's it. We're so small scale. I mean, this first release is 1,000 bottles. The rum, I think, is going to be 400 bottles. It's a number. It's a big number for us, but for other, it's a tiny drop compared to others as well. So really, and we are going into this aware that probably most of our sales are going to be UK sales, just because that's where we do our work as a band and with our events.
Sure.
So there'll be, we do have people that we know out in Europe or the US that we think will be interested and might want to push it forwards. And now that we can do the US in a way that's not ridiculous, hopefully, we can get more of a relationship with US consumers. But yeah, we have partners that can send it out there, and we'll see what happens. Most of our sales will be the UK.
So where can one buy this? I've been listening for this answer myself and haven't heard it, and so I'm sure the listeners are listening carefully as well.
It means that I'm not doing my job of coming out here and plugging my own product, really. I'm too busy talking about, let's talk about Pete, guys. Like, that's what's really interesting here.
We derailed you. We apologize.
No. So we're working through a retailer called the Spirit Co., and they have set up a very impressive delivery network, being able to get things, and they do it legally too. They're able to get things to countries that normally it is tricky to get those things to those countries too, in a way that's not prohibitively expensive. So what it would be actually is that you would go to, you can go to our website, you click on the shop link, and there'll be two links there. One will be kind of the link that we've been using, where you're buying through our normal UK retail partner, an indie bottler called Dramfool, who are wonderful. But then there'll also be an option that if you're in the US, Poland, where I live and where I'm at now, and a couple other tricky countries, go to the Spirit Co. because they'll be able to sort you out. And so essentially between what Dramfool can ship and what the Spirit Co. can ship, we can cover a lot of countries, including tricky ones, and now the US, which we're really pleased about. We weren't actually expecting to be able to do the U.S. With this first release. We were hoping to eventually do it, but that we could do it comfortably with this first release is something we're actually quite pleased about.
Awesome, man. Best of luck. Best of luck cracking those markets, man.
Yeah. We'll see.
There were two other things that I wanted to mention really quickly, and they're going to be short. I don't know if you know this or remember this. Maybe you do know this. But both you and Jason were made keepers on the same night this past October. So we're a group of 3 keepers.
Lovely.
There you go. Keep it
Rock
real.
on.
Yeah, I like that.
That's why I rolled up one trouser leg.
And then 2 final questions. And Jason, if you have something, please. Maybe this is more of a statement. Whenever you need a punk prog band with influences of Zappa, Iggy Pop, Captain Beefheart, The Kinks, and Talking Heads, give me a ring, because we're happy to join you. And if you're like, man, that music's terrible, it'll never fit with any of my whiskey, that's understood too. But most importantly, this is fresh off the ground. What has you excited in these next few years? I mean, you're already talking about exciting things. The fact that you're going to be able to ship to the U.S. straight out the gate is really exciting. But do you have other things that are on the horizon for Rhythm and Booze that you're really excited about and want to share with the listeners?
This record label is it. It's our way of approaching, again, puke in the mouth, a multisensory experience holistically. And we think we're doing so, and we are putting all our love and devotion into it. Yeah. Which therefore means we're not some gimmick. At least I don't think we are, because we have put a lot of thought and work into it for a long time. Yeah. So this is what we want to do, and I think then the scope to develop it is we're starting with great music, with great single casks. Can't go wrong with that. But I would love to do larger scale stuff where you can look at collaborations around blends, custom blends.
You mentioned that.
I think that would be my dream. My dream would be blending to the music. Either you blend a single malt or a blend. I think that would be my ultimate goal, where the whiskey's customized to the music. Yeah. As opposed to curated. Curated is great. We'll always be doing that. But to do that, just the idea, you know. And also, I've always wanted an excuse to do some serious blending too, because I think it's such a fascinating art. And then in terms of the music side, in terms of the band itself, the biggest thing we got going on is we're doing a 2.5-week run at the Edinburgh Fringe, the largest arts festival in the world, really. We got a show called 2 Guys, 3 Drams, and kind of does what it says on the tin. We lay down some tunes. We've got 3 whiskeys, and we do sort of a theater show, interactive theater show, where we play blues tunes, but also educate people onto how to sound clever about whiskey, so they know how to sound clever whenever they're drinking whiskey for the rest of their lives, even if they don't know what they're talking about. We also are showcasing some really interesting whiskeys as well that people wouldn't normally think about buying or trying. So now they get to try it, and that's something that's quite cool. And so we think there's scope to do more with that theatrical element. We've done the show before. We did it last year. We sold every single ticket on a 10-night run.
Wow.
So now we did 10 shows last year. Now we're doing 34 shows, 2 shows a day for 17 days this year.
Holy moly.
So I'll be performing, because then we got some other bands that are performing at the Fringe. So I'm doing something like 45 gigs in 19 nights, I think it is. Looking at something like that. So yeah.
I don't think that math works. How many people are you? Are you alone 3 people? Because you got places to be.
Yeah. It's actually I've done more at the Fringe than this before. My record is 103 gigs in 23 nights in 2016, and I was producing 11 blues-based shows at the Fringe as well. I don't know how I did it, but yeah. Some people do some insane things at the Fringe. Somehow you find the stamina. I guess so. Joshua, you'll relate to this. So when you're hustling as a musician, what you want more than anything is you just want a gig, man. You just want a gig. Like, yeah, sure, there's this whole business element and trying to get your music out there, but really, you just want gigs. So the Fringe is, here are all the gigs you could possibly want stuffed down your throat. Process it and deal. And so it's the gigging musician's equivalent of those Catholic flagellants that would get on their knees and flail themselves as they crawl to some venerated statue somewhere. And so that's kind of what the Fringe has been for me, this kind of combination, agony and ecstasy of just gigging. And so this year will be no exception, which will be fun. But yeah, so with this, it's we think there's more scope to develop that theater element. Before I started humble bragging more about myself, which I've done slightly too much, I think, over the course of this interview, with apologies. I didn't intend to, I promise. But we did the show for Glen Scotia. So we'd done it in the Fringe before, but then Glen Scotia asked us to come in and to do the show, but oriented to Glen Scotia whiskeys. And we said, sure, that sounds great. Let's do it. And we did it. And it actually ended up being, we knew it was going to be good. It ended up being much better even than we thought, because it created this really intimate, intense experience where kind of the whiskey was this really interesting go-between. Where in the theater show, the whiskey is that go-between for an interaction with the audience anyways, and it's brilliant. With the Glen Scotia, because you're at the distillery, people have come for this. It was something that became somehow, to everyone's surprise, more intense than anticipated. So I think there's a lot of, I'd like to do more of that. I'd like to explore that more. And we've got some things lined up where we can do that. So, but in general, and then also, yeah, we've got some other projects on the go, but that's, I think we very much think deeply about how live performance can be used as a way to enhance the whiskey drinking experience, and then vice versa, the experience of how can you use the whiskey drinking experience to enhance and create even more of a bond between performer and audience, and just simply create something for the overall group that includes both.
Wow. Hey, have you spoken with Hans Fringa about this? I imagine. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. If there's anyone you're speaking with, it's Hans. Yeah.
Yes.
Instant head nod on that one.
Yes. So Hans has been kind of ahead of the curve of everybody, I would say. He was definitely one of the first to explore it. Dave Broom also has done some fascinating work. So Dave Broom's been informed by work from Charles Spence. He's the Oxford professor that's been looking at the neurology of flavor, I guess, and how you can changing contexts of how you consume whiskey specifically changes perceptions of whiskey. So we do that with our work. Dave has done some amazing things with that. One of the best tastings I've ever been to was him. It was Dave. It was just 15 minutes. He did it in 15 minutes with one dram, and he was playing soundscapes through kind of wireless disco headphones. Yeah. And he was having us hold up cards with flavor notes as the whiskey changed. The same whiskey, same dram, that was changing with the different soundscapes he played. We even knew, it's not like he was trying to fool us. He told us what the trick was in advance. Yeah. It still worked. Wow. It was nuts, and he did it in 15 minutes. It was fascinating. And then Neil Ridley does some awesome work. So Neil Ridley, so we did our Think Glen Scotia. Neil Ridley did a fascinating Think Glen Scotia where with a very good producer, a guy called Dean Honer, I think his name is. They brought in the best of the best microphones into the Glen Scotia distillery. They recorded as many sounds of that distillery as possible. They even have the, Josh, do you know about this one? The microphone, the shape of a human head that costs like $15,000 and it perceives sound waves the same way the human ear does.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's some insane piece of gear that is so sensitive and can account for 360-degree sound inputs and all this sort of thing. So they did all of that. They recorded tons of sounds, and they created like a soundscape of the production of whiskey, about 15 minutes long, the length it takes to enjoy a dram, and you're hearing the production process throughout this soundscape in order.
Yeah.
Using the sounds that they recorded. But then what they also did is they used those found sounds, formed them into a workable backing track, and they brought in a Scottish singer-songwriter who wrote a song for this project, and they recorded her singing it into a steel washback at the distillery. So there's this natural insane
reverb.
washback reverb.
Yeah.
And they released a single. Using the sounds of the distillery and her singing into a washback. So that's another. So again, this is the beginning. We're gonna see so much more. So yeah.
Well, we asked you what you're excited about. You lived up to the advance billing. That was perfect.
It's just that. I don't know. I think for me, part of the reason I really do love whiskey and love working in it is it has allowed me personally and professionally to explore whatever it is I want to explore in a way that is interesting, in a way that takes... It's just in a way that's interesting. It's interesting. Yep. So you just keep at it. And if I stop being interested, then I'll probably move out of this industry. I don't think I'll ever stop being interested, as I'm sure it is for you guys.
Yeah, right. It's funny. I often think about the connection of music and whiskey, not the way that you do. And it's been great to hear how you think about that connection. But you know, when I've had the longest day at work, the best escape is to shut off my brain and just let muscle memory take over and play music and get creative in there. And you don't have to think, you're just doing it. And whiskey can do that too. Whiskey can take you into that place. The best whiskey will shut everything out and have you focus on this, and can even take you to different moments in time, different memories, and the fact that you're connecting the two in this really thoughtful way, I think is pretty special. And that's, you know, Jason and I receive so many press releases, and no offense to the people that send the press releases to us, but we typically say, it's not what we're looking to cover. But yours was a name that was familiar and one that we covered many of your stories, and the project just sounded awesome. And so just really thankful to have you on. Thankful for your time and in the conversation today.
Yeah, thanks so much.
No, thank you guys. Really, what a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me on. I'm just glad to hear that you think it's got legs to it. And, you know, in general, it's just always fun to have these kinds of geeky conversations, isn't it? So
exactly.
Really, really appreciate it. And it's a pleasure, really.
Awesome. Cheers, man.
Cheers, man. You know what I had in my head just before we went on into the interview, and you really highlighted this point of me being in Connecticut, you being in Virginia, and Felipe being in Poland, in Gdansk to be specific. Is I had that Bowie song in my head, "Let's Gdansk," which is one of my favorite Bowie songs of all time. Listen, Sorry. I told you I just sit on these jokes, Jason, and they're really shitty jokes.
I'm trying to make a laugh come out of my throat, but I just can't. I'm just shaking my head and looking out my one window here and just wondering, how did my life get to here?
Did you ever go skiing in the rain?
Oh my God. No. You are so ready for 50, my friend.
Have you gone Gdansking with the devil in the pale moonlight? All right, I'll stop. In all,
do you ask that of all your victims?
In all seriousness, Felipe Schrieberg, thank you so much for your time. It really was a pleasure talking with Felipe and getting to learn, about some of the things he's got going on. But it was really cool connecting some of those dots. I remember you, me, Jess, and Swedescott being on Isla during the Phage in 2019 and going over to Lagavulin and seeing this drum set that, had a whiskey barrel there and talking with Felipe and asking him about that. And I just had never put two and two together that was him, that was his band. And so, yeah, it was really cool finally connecting with Felipe.
Absolutely. And as we talked about in the interview, to simply be at Blair Castle with him, to see him on the night of the Keepers, to be able to go past him and say, hey, we want to get you on One Nation Under Whiskey, and for him to say, yeah, reach out. And now here we are a number of months later making that happen. It's, as much as I did say before we went into the recording, here we are, Virginia, Connecticut, Poland, and it all came together so easily.
Yeah.
Once we started planning it, it came together really quickly. It just took us a number of months to get to that beginning of the planning. Yeah. But what a joy, what a great conversation, what a whiskey guy. Even having that University of St. Andrews connection and then going on to write about his dissertation on sustainable practices in whiskey distilling. So, yeah, he's been plowing that whiskey furrow for a good number of years now as well. So I love it when we keep encountering people who've been doing the same as us. Passion into freelance, into gigs here.
Yeah.
Combining a passion for music with a passion for whiskey. Yeah, I'm excited to see where he goes with the record label. I think that's I think
I love the idea. I think it's super smart. What a way to connect two things that hit people on a multitude of levels, and those two things quite often intersect in very cool ways. So yeah, I think it's smart. He's been in this business long enough and has tasted enough whiskeys that him and his business partner / bandmate, I have no doubt they're selecting some good whiskey to be putting out. So I'm looking forward to that. He's sending us some small samples as well. So I was hoping the samples were going to arrive for this episode so we could taste along with it. But unfortunately, they're not. So maybe in a future episode, we'll get to just follow up here and give you our thoughts on what this blended malt is doing.
As easy it is to host international interviews, still takes a long time to get physical samples moved between countries. So it goes. I'm glad we got him on the record, glad we started talking about the project, and glad we could kind of highlight his history as well. So time very well spent and very enjoyably spent.
So I want to hit a couple of bits of news, just really short, because I do realize that we had a slightly longer interview with Felipe, and there was an email that I wanted to bring up, which I think is sort of the timing of it is pretty good.
And I certainly have a saved PDF that I would like to bring to the attention of our listeners as well.
I wonder if it's the same. Anyway.
Extra, extra! Read all about it! Life story of Playboy Penny! Extra, extra!
you and I, earlier this year, and I'm going to be talking U.S. specific right now, so apologies for our overseas listeners here. We will start talking about some of our ROW stuff. But I want to talk U.S. specific. So at the beginning of the year, you and I launched a series of bottlings online, which we still have some stock on some of the bottlings that are there. I mean, what were they? They were our North British. We may have a few bottles of that left. That was the 14-year-old and heavily sherry. Was it 14?
Yeah, I think North British is showing sold out on the website.
Okay. So there you go. So that one's sold out. I take that back. But we've got some Macmira.
But the French brandy. There's very few bottles of French brandy sitting on our website.
So a few
that has sold so nicely. Just ticked along right through the summer. Love the people who just keep buying it, replenishing it, telling friends they get a bottle. It's been nice to watch that tick along.
Well, what's interesting is when people start connecting the dots as to which producer it likely is, that same vintage bottling would be close to $1,300 rather than $195 that we're charging for ours. So they say, oh, wait a second, maybe I do need that second bottle. So that's been nice. But we've got some of our Macmira remaining, some of our Paul John peated remaining, a bit of our Othrusk 26-year-old.
Yep, a few bottles of that as well. Yeah, a few cases.
So those are some of the bottlings that were released a bit earlier this year. And I know I'm leaving some out, right? I mean, this is the incomplete Joshua list, and I'm okay living in that world. We then, sometime around April, May, released our retail release number 9, which had 5 different bottlings, including our Wolf Island Take 2, which was a marriage of 6 casks, and our Kalila 7, which was a marriage of 2 casks, our Inchgour 10, marriage of 2 casks, and so on. And the news that I'm about to break now is come the end of August, we're looking at bottling 4 more casks, and this is going to be American whiskeys, specifically American single malts plus a bourbon. So we'll have our 6-year-old Woodinville bourbon barrel or bourbon that our dear Elijah Ammon selected and we approved wholeheartedly because it's excellent. One of our Westwards, we have 2 of those barrels, but we're just releasing one for now. And that one is also a 6-year-old, if I'm not mistaken.
I would have to check my notes.
Yeah, but that's with some special malt going on there. That one's going to be exciting. Our Westland, which is, get this, 9 years old, peated.
That number I do know.
Peated 9-year-old in a first fill Pinot de Charente cask. And that is, I mean, all of this is insane, but I'm a Pinot de Charente kind of fanatic, so I'm really excited about that, obviously. And then what is our 4th one again, Jason?
Local to me.
That's our VDC, baby. So that's our 5-year-old Virginia Distillery Company. 5 years in an STR cask. And that one.
Exactly.
Man, that one sang when we tasted that cask sample, and it's tasting great now. So
absolutely. And I think I've said this previously on the podcast. For anybody who supported the VDC sherry butt, we have thought long and hard and tasted far and wide, along with our friends at VDC, to get a good sequel. So we're not talking Temple of Doom here. This is, we have just jumped straight to The Crusade. Shit, what's the 3rd movie called?
Last Crusade. But it is not our last one.
Last Crusade.
So
and that's the thing, I didn't want to say last.
Are you suggesting that we can even?
We can even.
That's not
Boom,
odd.
shakalaka.
That's not odd at all. So that's going to be really, really exciting. And I know a lot of people have been asking about our wild turkeys. Those are coming, and we will be bottling those. And we'll be announcing those shortly. But that's sort of a watch this space kind of a thing.
Yeah, the thing I would say with you listing all of those bottles there, and it's a number of bottles, not too many sitting in the warehouse behind the scenes, but to reward people who support Single Cask Nation,
Thank you.
the lottery for turkeys will be pulled from buyer lists. So if you're new to us, you've heard about us, please go ahead, get a purchase under your belt, make yourself eligible for these big turkey lotteries that we have going forward. So.
And it could be anything. We have bottles on our website right now that are $75, right? So, yeah, we really want to protect the Nation members who have been supporting us, whether it's from year one or from last month. If you've placed your order and you're a Nation member who supports us, we want to support you and make you eligible for the lottery. If you're only here for the turkey, well, you got to be here for more than the turkey, right? I mean, you support your local liquor store to get access to some of the more allocated stuff. Well, support us and we'll support you. So that was the news that I wanted to bring up. And again, we'll be reaching out by email. We'll be reaching out on our Facebook page. If you're a member, please check us out, facebook.com/SingleCastNation. If you're a member, we'll let you into the group. The last thing that I'll say here is we're going to have a special promotion going on that will come just a bit after the launch of this episode. So keep an eye on your inboxes. Keep an eye on our Facebook group for details on that. That's really all the news I wanted to say. Was there anything else? Am I missing anything, Jason?
Yeah, I was just going to get us out of the news segment by circling back to what you said at the beginning, which is there is going to be ROW information coming very soon. We'll have Jess back on to talk about that. I think that was very successful last time we did it. And we listen very carefully. Nation in the US keeps saying more Scotch online, more Scotch online. We've got some more Scotch coming online, and they are very special casks. So we listen continually. We've got 3 distinct streams to populate. We've got US retail, we've got US online, and we've got global retail. And we are trying to keep as many people happy in as many countries and as many states, and those who buy exclusively online. So, but yeah, there's some good stuff coming down the pipeline. And again, bottling plans are afoot. We work diligently behind the scenes to keep things ticking along. And it doesn't always show up front, but stick with us. We've had a hot summer, and we're going to have a good fall and head into the winter strong. So,
beauty.
I have said my piece.
So the email that I have, just switching gears here, is from one Dan Greisen, and
I have somebody else.
Beauty. And I bring up Dan Greisen's email because he reached out to us a little bit after Paul McDonough from the Bon Accord in Glasgow had passed away. And we had asked people, if you have a story, please reach out to us. Let us know. We want to share it. So many people have had a connection to Paul and want to talk about it. And so this is one that came up, and I wanted to bring it to your attention, Jason, and to the listeners. And, Dan has been such an avid listener of the podcast and such a strong supporter of the Nation for a good long while. And so I'm happy to read this one. So
Perfect.
The subject of this email is the Bon Accord, when a place is more than a place, which is such a lovely way to launch into this. So he says, hello, J, and J. Well, I'm a bit behind on my One Nation Under Whiskey listening, so I'm sending this note a little late. While I was not fortunate enough to meet Paul and therefore don't have a story about him, I would like to take a few minutes to share my story of my trip to the Bon. I'll try to make it brief, but sometimes I suffer from being a bit long-winded, something I know you know nothing about. Last year, I made a trip to Scotland and had one day to spend in Glasgow. I had a lot of the usual tourist destinations on a crammed itinerary, including plans to end the day at the Bon Accord. After a very long day, I was tired and had an early wake-up call to catch my flights. And as the day drew close to an end, I toyed with the idea of skipping the Bon. However, my heart convinced my brain that I could sleep on the plane and didn't fly across the ocean to stay in a hotel room. Boy, am I glad I did. For me, there's no better way to get a feel for a place you are visiting than to walk through it. So I ditched the public transportation, walked the 1.5-mile trek, walked in and sat at the bar. I took a few minutes to soak it all in and ordered a quick dram. I'm not one to randomly strike up a conversation, so I just sat there for a while and enjoyed the atmosphere. I sat in front of some crazy contraption that had the bartender pumping like mad to get beer into a glass. My first thought was, quote, man, they have more modern ways to get beer from a keg. But I figured I'd just ask what it is. The very busy bartender took the time to explain it was the beer engine and how it worked, the style of beer it dispensed, and walked me through all of the beers. He offered samples of anything I wanted, and eventually I settled on one I liked and ordered a pint. Another person behind the bar came over and chatted with me for a bit, then pointed to my beer and said, "That one's on me." How nice is that? Just a quick pause. Like, that is just pure the Bon, right? I thanked him for his hospitality, and we started chatting about whiskey. Come to find out, the man being so kind to me was Thomas. I told him I had my eye on the Ardbeg 1975, but with my budget taking a beating already, I was hesitant at 70 pounds a dram. He pulled up the bottle on an auction site and showed me what it was going for now, and said if he replaces that bottle, he would have to charge 3 times what it is now. But he does not raise the price mid-bottle. He charges according to what the bottle cost him. So yeah, I bought one, and a sample to take home. So we bought 2 drams. Amazing. Well, Thomas was so busy, so I started to chat with the 2 gentlemen to my right, Alistair and John. They were 2 lovely retired chaps and spent much of their night regaling me with stories and sharing their pride in their country and in the Bon. And when I asked what their favorite dram was, one quickly replied Scapa. I can honestly say I've never had anything from Scapa. When he found that out, immediately offered to buy me a dram so he could share with me what he loves. I can honestly say I don't remember if I liked it, loved it, or hated it, but at that moment, it was a wonderful drink which I thoroughly enjoyed and had so much fun to share with my new friends. He's got a bit more. He's got quite a bit more there. But I'll just end it with sort of the ending here. You know, he goes on to say just how much of an impression the Bon made at him, which he didn't have to say. It's obvious that it did. Mm-hmm. And he just says, I don't expect this note to be read on the podcast. I was just feeling a bit sentimental after listening to both of you talk about Paul and his bar and needed to share my story with you all. Cheers to you, Joshua, Jason, and Jess. I know losing a friend is not an easy thing, and my condolences to you all, Dan.
Yeah, perfect, Dan. Absolutely perfect. Yeah. Cheers to that. In all sincerity, it's interesting to me. We get a number of emails from people who say, "I don't expect you to read this, but I just wanted to say it, or I just wanted to write it, or I just wanted to put it in someone's inbox."
Yeah.
You know, it's really incredible to me. And, you know, we always mention Ollie's name, but Ollie's a funny one because he'll say, "Yeah, I go through the part of my week where I listen to you both, but you don't get to hear me when I talk back to you. And then I go through the part of my week where I get to talk to you and you hear me and you respond in real time, and it's really weird." So I know that through this podcast we occupy an interesting spot in people's lives where there's something so very intimate to either listening to us when you're driving somewhere and it's just the three of us in your car, or you've got us in your ears with your AirPods or your earbuds, whatever you wear. Like, it's so intimate to be speaking directly into somebody's ears. And as much as that means a lot to our listeners, it means a lot to us as well.
Yes, it does.
Like, we don't take that lightly. We love that intimacy. The fact we can spend 15, 20 minutes at the start of today's episode rambling on about Indiana Jones and knowing that that'll be appreciated by the people who look for this podcast is tremendous and means the world to us. So, I was just sitting here basking in such a positive report from Dan about the Scottish people and the people who are in the Bawn and the people who run the Bawn, and it makes me incredibly proud to say that's in Glasgow, and I'm born and raised not far from right there, and we do take it seriously to evangelise whiskey and proselytise and buy a dram for somebody to say, I enjoy this, I hope you enjoy this.
Right? Yep.
So good. So good.
Yep.
I have fired up the PDF machine.
All right.
And I have a telegram to report. So this comes to us by way of Instagram. And so I know you don't expect me to be reading out an Instagram post, but this was very kindly sent to us by Johnny Baldery, who looks after us. So thanks to Johnny for that.
Thank you, Johnny.
This comes from Whisky of Life, which is that throwback, and I haven't been on social media in the longest time, but this person only identifies themselves through Whisky of Life. So here we are. If you're on social media, you will know who that is. I am not. I do not. So great note. Hey guys, I listened to your podcast for Paul McDonough earlier today. I had the pleasure of working at the Bawn as a 20-year-old exchange student at Glasgow Uni in 2007-2008. He was one of the best bosses I have ever had. I returned to Scotland a number of times and always went to the Bawn. He always met me and chatted with me for hours. Every year I sent him a Christmas card. So here's the story. We're in the Bawn for dinner on a Sunday before we head out the next day. Paul meets us for a drink before dinner and a session after. After dinner, my family head to the bar for a drink, and my wife is standing in the corner by the game that always stood there. I know exactly what he's talking about, the puggy we call them.
Yep.
Standing next to the puggy. I see her start to move toward the gantry, and she reaches behind the bar and pulls out a Christmas card I had sent him with my daughters on it. Wow. She asks why he still had it hanging in May, and he said, Steve is a part of this bar, his daughters are too. Wow. Anytime I get a picture, I will put it up. And then Steve here says, such a special man. When I started blogging on whiskey and reviewing, he was one of my first followers and supportive all the way. I will miss him. We didn't talk much in recent years, but every time we did, it was a joy. And that's, as I say, signed at whisky_of_life. And it echoes exactly what we said in our extra about Paul. We could go 3 months between seeing him. We could go 9 months. We could go 15 months. He was still Paul. We would still be Jason and or Joshua, depending on the arrangement. And we drammed. We chatted. We caught up. We got our New Year pour from him. He had details in his head that I can't even get my head around. From seeing people, employing people, working with people, championing whiskey with people. Yeah, really, really special man, as Whisky of Life says here, and we will miss him also.
One of a kind. There you go. I'll tell you, I don't think that there's a better way to end this segment. So, Jason, thank you for reading that. Whisky of Life, thank you so much for writing that in and sharing that story. And again, if you're listening and you have a story you've been sitting on and you want to share it, my guess is we're going to receive a few of these. And we're happy to be reading that. So if you have a story to share, or if you simply just want to write in, or if you have a question, or if you've got a story that you want to share with us for us to highlight on Extra, you can reach out to us, questions at onenationunderwhiskey.com. Of course, no E in whiskey, or reach out to us, info at singlecastnation.com, and we will tend to that, or by Instagram, or by, well, I won't say Twitter anymore, because Twitter doesn't exist. It's now X. There you go. That's another story. Jason, let's not get into that. I'm going to raise my glass to you, to Felipe, to
Absolutely,
and to those that write in, and to those that listen, and to those that have been supporting Single Cast Nation and One Nation Under Whiskey. Cheers, everybody.
Cheers.